The warriors of the Alliance had always prided themselves on their strength, discipline, and adherence to the sacred code of honor. It was a creed passed down through generations, binding all warrior species under its rule. Among the oldest and most sacred of these rules was one that had stood unchallenged for millennia: never kill humans. The origin of the rule was rooted in the past, during a time when humans were considered too weak, too insignificant to be worthy opponents. They were fragile creatures, barely scraping by on their inhospitable planet, Earth, surrounded by countless dangers. What glory could there be in fighting a species that could not even tame its own world? Over time, this rule had evolved from a mere strategy of mercy into a symbol of the Alliance's superior honor. For General Vorik, the code was more than a set of guidelines, it was the core of his being. Vorik came from a long line of decorated warriors, each of whom had lived and died by the code. His people, the Zhurk, were known for their unwavering commitment to honor, and Vorik had inherited that legacy without question. He had risen through the ranks with a reputation for upholding tradition, often reminding his subordinates of their sacred duty. There was no dishonor greater than breaking the code. And yet something had changed. The galaxy was not the same as it had been centuries ago. Humans had advanced. No longer the helpless prey they once were, humans had spread to the stars, carving out a place for themselves with an almost reckless determination. They were adaptable, resourceful, and some would argue, dangerous. The old assumptions about their weakness no longer held. Now, whispers spread through the ranks of the Alliance, and many believed that humanity had become a threat that could no longer be ignored. Some of the younger species openly questioned the rule that had once been unquestionable. Why should the humans be spared, when their expansion threatened the stability of the galaxy? Vorik had heard these grumblings but had always dismissed them. The code was absolute. But when the order came, everything changed. The message arrived from the Council, bearing the seal of the highest authority. Vorik stood in the command chamber, surrounded by holographic projections of his superiors. They delivered the command with cold, calculated precision. The human colony on the planet Orestes, a resource-rich world on the edge of Alliance space, was to be eradicated. Vorik was to lead the strike force. The colony was growing too quickly, encroaching on territory that was vital to the Alliance's interests. At first, Vorik thought he had misunderstood. Exterminate a human colony? He looked to the faces of the council members, searching for some sign of error, but found none. They spoke with absolute clarity, with a tone that allowed no argument. The council's decision was final. Vorik felt a surge of disbelief, then a wave of revulsion. Kill humans? The very thought turned his stomach. The code was clear: never kill human star. It was the law of the Alliance, a law he had sworn to uphold. To break it would be to forsake everything he stood for, everything his ancestors had died for. But the code, Vorik began, his voice steady but firm. It forbids this. One of the council members, a cold-eyed bureaucrat from a lesser race, cut him off sharply. The code is not a relic, General. It is adaptable, as we must be. Times have changed. Humanity is no longer the weak species it once was. They are expanding unchecked. This colony threatens our resources, and the Council has deemed them a necessary sacrifice. Vorik's hands clenched into fists, but he maintained his composure. There is no honor in killing those we once spared. Honor? The word was spat with disdain. This is about survival, General. You will carry out your orders. The communication ended abruptly, leaving Vorik standing alone in the dimly lit chamber. His mind raced. He had faced countless battles, made decisions that weighed heavily on him, but none like this. The code was the very fabric of his existence, and yet now he was being asked to tear it apart. He had been a loyal soldier all his life, but could he follow an order that so blatantly violated the principles he held sacred? As he stood there, the weight of the decision pressing down on him, doubts began to gnaw at the edges of his mind. Why had the Council changed its stance so suddenly? Why this colony, on this planet? Vorik had seen humanity's expansion across the stars, and though they were advancing, they had never been a direct threat to the Alliance. Something about this order felt wrong. It wasn't just a violation of the code, it was the reasoning behind it. He sensed a deeper, more insidious motive lurking beneath the surface of the Council's command. Vorik knew he couldn't ignore this. To follow the order blindly would be to betray everything he stood for. But to refuse. He wasn't naive. He knew what happened to those who disobeyed direct orders from the Council. There would be consequences, severe consequences. His career, his life, everything he had built would be at risk. And yet, the thought of slaughtering innocent humans, of breaking the most sacred law of the Alliance, was unthinkable. For the first time in his long career, General Vorik felt truly uncertain. He stared out into the vast expanse of stars beyond the command chamber window, the weight of his decision settling heavily on his shoulders. Whatever path he chose, there would be no turning back. Vorik's fleet emerged from hyperspace above the human colony. From the moment his sensors locked onto the planet, it was clear this was not some fragile outpost clinging to survival. The colony was thriving, with a sprawling network of advanced infrastructure. Defensive systems, powerful and state-of-the-art, were strategically placed around the planet's perimeter. Energy shields rippled in the upper atmosphere, protecting the surface from any orbital bombardment. It was obvious that the humans had adapted to the harsh environment of this resource-rich, but hostile world, turning it into a stronghold. The planet, once barren and inhospitable, now teemed with life, its cities built with precision and efficiency. Tall structures glistened under the alien sun, and vast agricultural domes covered the landscape, producing food in an environment where nothing should grow. The technological ingenuity of the humans was on full display, and it was clear to Vorik that they had prepared for the worst. This wasn't just a settlement, it was a fortress, designed to withstand sieges from even the most formidable forces. Vorik's gaze drifted over the tactical display, taking in the sight of human ingenuity. Thousands of years ago, when the Alliance had first encountered them, humanity had been weak, barely more than a curiosity. Their planet was one of the most dangerous in the known galaxy, teeming with predators, diseases, and environmental disasters. It was a wonder they had survived at all. But now, standing on the edge of this human colony, Vorik could see just how far they had come. They had adapted, evolved, and learned. He could feel a growing respect for their tenacity. In the past, he had dismissed the stories of humanity's rapid rise as exaggerated. Now, staring down at this vibrant world, those tales felt all too real. The humans were no longer prey, they had become something else entirely. Vorik's fleet hovered in orbit for only a few minutes before his ship received an incoming transmission. It was a human signal, requesting communication. They had noticed his fleet, and they were ready. Vorik ordered his officers to patch the signal through to the main command deck. The holographic display flickered, and the image of a human woman appeared before him. She stood tall, her presence commanding, her uniform crisply pressed. Her dark eyes met Vorik's unflinchingly, exuding calm confidence despite the obvious tension in the air. This must be the leader of the colony, Captain Elena Reyes. "General Vorik, I presume?" she asked, her voice steady and clear. "We've been monitoring your fleet's arrival. I believe you are here to speak with us." Vorik's expression remained unreadable, though internally, he was surprised by her composure. Most species quivered when faced with the might of an Alliance fleet. Yet here she stood, unshaken. "Captain Reyes," Vorik replied with a nod. "I am here under the orders of the Council." Reyes didn't flinch. "We expected as much. Our colony has grown, and we understand that our presence may have become inconvenient." Her calmness was unsettling. Vorik had prepared for resistance, perhaps even fear, but she exuded neither. Instead, her words were measured, as if she knew exactly what was at stake, and exactly what he was there to do. "We know of the code," Reyes continued. "It's an old tradition among the Alliance. Never kill humans, isn't that right?" Vorik stiffened slightly. She knew. Of course, they knew. The code was ancient, a rule so deeply ingrained in the Alliance's history that even humans were aware of it. Yet, the way she spoke, there was an undertone of certainty in her voice, as if she believed the code was still as ironclad as it had always been. But Vorik knew that things had changed. The code remains intact, Vorik said carefully. But circumstances have shifted. Your colony's expansion, it has caused concern. Concern, Reyes repeated, her tone neutral, though her sharp eyes missed nothing. I see. And what exactly has caused this concern? Our presence here? Our growth? Vorik didn't answer immediately. He didn't know how much she knew about the Council's true intentions. His orders had been clear: eliminate the colony. But in this moment, facing Reyes and her poised, strategic demeanor, the thought of annihilation felt more dishonorable than ever. Humanity was no longer weak, no longer helpless. Destroying this colony would not be a victory. It would be an execution. We are here to open discussions, Vorik said, choosing his words carefully. But if those discussions fail, the Council will not hesitate to take more decisive action. Reyes smiled slightly, a hint of steel beneath her calm exterior. General, you and I both know that humans don't give in easily. We have never been ones to fold under pressure. Vorik's gaze hardened, but there was no malice behind it. That is what I have come to understand, Captain. There was a pause, a quiet moment of mutual recognition between them. Vorik saw in her the same unyielding strength that he admired in his own people. She knew the risks, but she wasn't afraid. And why should she be? Her colony was fortified, her people prepared. They were ready for whatever came their way, even if it was an alliance strike force. I will relay your message to the Council, Reyes said, her tone firm but diplomatic. But know this, General, we are prepared to defend ourselves. The humans of this colony will not be exterminated without a fight. Vorik nodded slowly. I expected nothing less. As the communication ended, Vorik found himself deep in thought. The humans had come so far. They were no longer the weak species the Alliance had once dismissed. They had built a world from nothing, carved out a place for themselves in a hostile galaxy. To attack them now, after all they had achieved, would be more than a violation of the code. It would be a disgrace to everything Vorik believed in. The seeds of doubt that had been planted earlier began to take root, growing stronger with each passing moment. Vorik could not shake the feeling that the Council's motives were tainted by something more sinister than mere territorial concerns. And yet, he was bound by duty, by the oath he had sworn to follow orders. The conflict within him intensified, and for the first time in his life, Vorik questioned whether his loyalty to the Alliance was worth the price of his honor. The countdown to the attack had already begun. Vorik stood on the command deck, staring at the tactical display, the human colony still highlighted in front of him. His finger hovered over the control panel, a single command away from unleashing devastation. But something inside him rebelled. His honor, his code, everything he had believed in, it screamed against the order he had been given. In that moment, Vorik made his decision. No, he said quietly, pulling his hand away from the controls. His voice grew stronger, more resolute. We will not attack. Commander Sarek, his second-in-command, looked up in shock. General, what are you saying? The orders were clear. The Council expects us to wipe them out. Vorik turned to face Sarek, his expression hard. The Council may have given an order, but I have sworn an oath to the code. We do not kill humans. This colony is no threat to us. Sarek's eyes narrowed, disbelief etched on his face. They are growing stronger, General. If we let them go now, they will become a threat. The Council knows this. We cannot allow weakness. Strength is not the same as dishonor, Vorik replied, his voice firm. We are not butchers. We are warriors, and warriors follow a code. Sarek took a step forward, anger creeping into his tone. You are putting all of us at risk. If you defy the Council, they will strip you of your command. They will exile you, or worse. Vorik's jaw tightened. He had already considered the consequences, and he knew that by defying these orders, he was risking everything: his rank, his reputation, even his life. But he could not bring himself to fire on those who had proven themselves strong, who had built something out of nothing, just as his own people had once done. The code is all that separates us from tyrants, Vorik said, his voice low but steady. If we break it, we become no better than those who seek only power. Sarek stepped back, fury and disbelief mingling in his eyes. You are making a mistake, General. A fatal one. The tension on the command deck grew palpable as the other officers exchanged uneasy glances. Some of them nodded in agreement with Vorik, their respect for the code unwavering. Others, like Sarek, had already been corrupted by the Council's fear of humanity's rise. They believed that the old ways were no longer practical in a galaxy that was changing. Vorik could sense the unease spreading through his fleet. The murmur of dissent grew louder, especially among the younger warriors, who had not lived through the eras where honor and the code meant everything. They had been raised in a time of growing corruption, where power and fear ruled over tradition. Vorik's refusal to follow the Council's orders had cracked open the divisions that had long been festering within the ranks. Tensions boiled over when Sarek, his expression twisted with frustration, stepped forward once again. If you will not follow the orders of the Council, then you are unfit to lead this fleet. A murmur of agreement rippled through a small group of officers who had aligned themselves with Sarek. It was clear that a mutiny was brewing. Vorik stood tall, his hand resting on the hilt of his ceremonial sword. You will not question my authority, Commander. But Sarek wasn't backing down. You've abandoned the will of the Council, General. And by doing so, you've abandoned us. At that moment, the crack in the fleet became a chasm. A faction of warriors stepped forward, siding with Sarek, their hands drifting toward their weapons. Vorik's loyalists, those who still believed in the sanctity of the code, moved to stand by their general, ready to defend him at all costs. The bridge hummed with rising tension, and it was clear that words were no longer enough to hold back the storm that was about to break. Meanwhile, down on the surface, Captain Reyes and the human colonists were not idle. They had been monitoring the alien fleet and had detected the signs of internal discord. Their advanced hacking systems intercepted fragments of the communications between Vorik's officers, and Reyes quickly realized that not all was well among the alien ranks. We're picking up tension in their command, her chief engineer reported, his fingers flying over the console. Looks like there's a power struggle happening up there. Reyes's expression was grim, but there was a spark of hope in her eyes. Good. If they're fighting among themselves, they'll be too distracted to focus on us. Double the defensive perimeter, and make sure all the anti-air systems are active. If they decide to attack, we'll be ready. The colonists worked quickly, fortifying their defenses while Reyes monitored the alien fleet. She couldn't be certain what was happening up there, but she knew that this moment of weakness could be their best chance for survival. If Vorik truly did honor the code, they might just make it out of this alive. Back aboard Vorik's ship, the mutiny finally erupted. Sarek, unwilling to wait any longer, drew his weapon, a sleek plasma blade that glowed with deadly energy. I will do what you are too weak to do, he spat, lunging at Vorik. For the future of the Alliance! Vorik drew his own blade in response, his movements swift and precise. The clash of metal and energy rang out across the command deck as the two warriors locked in combat. Around them, the bridge descended into chaos. Vorik's loyalists moved to defend their general, while Sarek's faction attempted to wrest control of the ship. The fight was brutal and swift, but Vorik's skill and experience far outmatched Sarek's ambition. With a single, decisive strike, Vorik disarmed his mutinous second-in-command, sending him crashing to the ground. Sarek's blade clattered across the floor, its energy dimming as Vorik's sword hovered above his throat. You have betrayed everything we stand for, Vorik said coldly. You are no warrior. Sarek glared up at him, defiance in his eyes. You are a fool, Vorik. The Council will destroy you. Vorik hesitated for a moment, then lowered his blade. I would rather die with honor than live as a traitor. As his loyalists subdued Sarek and his followers, Vorik felt the weight of his decision pressing down on him. The mutiny had been quelled, but the damage was done. He had defied the Council, and the Alliance would not forgive him for it. Yet in his heart he knew that this was the right path. The corruption within the Alliance had to be confronted, and he would not be the one to break the sacred code. The time had come to choose a new path, one that would change the fate of the galaxy forever. Vorik stood in the center of his command deck, surrounded by the aftermath of battle. His fleet was fractured, and the mutineers were regrouping to launch their final assault on the human colony. Time was running out. He needed help, an ally he never imagined seeking. He opened a secure channel and contacted Captain Reyes. Her image appeared on the screen, her face calm but wary. "I've made my decision," Vorik began, his voice firm. "I will not allow the destruction of your colony. But I cannot defeat the mutineers alone. I need your help." Reyes didn't answer immediately. Her eyes flicked across the screen, analyzing him, weighing her options. "You want an alliance?" she asked cautiously. "After everything?" "I do," Vorik replied. "Not for me. For my people's honor. For the code. And for the survival of your colony. We share a common enemy now, one that threatens both of us." Reyes took a breath, her expression hardening with resolve. "If we do this, it's a risk for both of us. But if we don't, your people will tear themselves apart, and we'll be next. I'll agree to help, but only if you guarantee the safety of my people." "You have my word," Vorik said, and for a moment they both understood that this fragile alliance was their best and only chance. With that, the two leaders coordinated their plan. The humans, with their technological prowess, would disrupt the mutineers' communications and sabotage their ships from a distance. Meanwhile, Vorik and his loyalists would retake control of his flagship by launching a direct assault. The combined forces would strike swiftly, aiming to dismantle the mutineers before they could regroup. The battle began. Human engineers, working quickly, hacked into the mutineers' systems. Communications between the renegade ships became garbled, orders lost in the chaos. The mutineers scrambled to adjust, but the damage was done. Reyes and her team had gained the upper hand. On the ground, Reyes led her team with precise efficiency, launching targeted strikes on the mutineers' weakened vessels. She used their confusion to full advantage, taking out key systems without having to face the ships head-on. The human colony's defense systems were also activated, shielding their world from incoming fire. The humans, who had long been underestimated, now stood as equals in the fight. Meanwhile, Vorik and his boarding party breached the mutineer flagship. Plasma fire echoed through the corridors as they moved, cutting through the renegade forces with precision. Vorik led from the front, his blade flashing as he fought his own kind. Each strike carried the weight of his resolve, to restore honor, to prevent further bloodshed, and to protect the code he had lived by for so long. His loyalists followed, inspired by his determination. Though outnumbered, they fought with a fierceness that took the mutineers by surprise. Vorik's presence on the battlefield turned the tide. His very name carried enough weight to make even the most hardened rebels hesitate. As the battle raged inside the ship, Vorik found himself face to face with Commander Sarek once again. The mutineer leader had survived their previous encounter, and now he stood ready to challenge Vorik once more. "You're a fool, Vorik," Sarek snarled, his plasma blade igniting. "You would throw away everything for the sake of a broken code." Vorik didn't flinch. "It's not the code that's broken. It's those who have twisted it for their own gain." They clashed, blade against blade, each strike ringing with the fury of a fight not just for power, but for the very soul of their people. Sarek fought with the desperation of a man who had already lost, while Vorik fought with the calm certainty of one who knew his path. In the end, Sarek's rage was no match for Vorik's skill. With a final, decisive blow, Vorik disarmed the mutineer once more, leaving him defeated and broken on the deck. "It's over," Vorik said, standing over him. "Your rebellion ends here." Sarek glared up at him, but there was no more fight left in his eyes. The battle was won. With the mutineers defeated, Vorik and his loyalists took control of the flagship. The remaining renegade forces, cut off from their leadership and communications, surrendered. The human colony was safe, and the threat had been neutralized. After the dust had settled, Vorik and Captain Reyes met in person for the first time. There was no hostility between them now, only the shared understanding of what they had both fought to preserve. "You kept your word," Reyes said, her tone neutral but with a hint of respect. "We wouldn't have made it without you. And I wouldn't have regained control of my fleet without your help," Vorik replied, inclining his head slightly. "You and your people fought with honor." Reyes studied him for a moment, then extended her hand. "Then I guess that makes us allies." Vorik clasped her hand firmly. It was an unusual gesture for him, but one he found fitting in this moment. "It does!" The alliance between humanity and Vorik's species, once unthinkable, was now sealed by battle and honor. They had both proven their strength, humans, through their ingenuity and resolve, and Vorik, by upholding the very principles that had once kept them apart. In the aftermath, as the human colony resumed its operations and Vorik's fleet regrouped, the two leaders stood side by side, contemplating the future. "The galaxy is changing," Vorik said quietly, his gaze fixed on the stars. "The old ways may no longer serve us." Reyes nodded. "Maybe it's time for new ways. But that doesn't mean we have to lose who we are." Vorik glanced at her, seeing the same fierce determination in her eyes that he had once associated only with his own people. Humans, he realized, were no longer the weak, insignificant race they had been millennia ago. They were a force to be respected, and perhaps, in time, admired. As they looked out into the vastness of space, Vorik couldn't help but wonder what this alliance would mean for the future of the galaxy. The balance of power had shifted, and with it, the ancient code would have to be revised. No longer could they ignore humanity's strength. But perhaps, Vorik thought, that was not a bad thing. Honor was not in clinging to the past, but in evolving with integrity. And as long as he remained true to that belief, there was hope for both his people and humanity. With the battle behind them and the future ahead, Vorik and Reyes stood as allies, ready to face whatever challenges lay on the horizon.